Hello Dysfunctioners, it's Beth here. I'm popping up with a very special extra episode of Electoral Dysfunction with Jess Phillips. She and I had a long chat earlier this week about all the abuse she's been getting in the past week or so. She's been at the centre of a political storm brewed up on X by tech billionaire Elon Musk, who has no fewer than 211 million followers. Seen as she is now the responsible government minister for safeguarding and is leading the marching government on violence against women and girls, we had a long conversation about what the government is going to do about grooming gangs and answered some of the accusations made against her and the Prime Minister about their handling of child sex abuse cases. It's a really powerful listen. And tomorrow you'll be able to hear our usual podcast with Ruth and Harriet as we unpack the interview and reflect on the events of the past week. Jess Phillips, hello. I don't know why I called you Jess Phillips. Everyone on this pod knows.
Jessica Rose Phillips.
Jessica Rose Phillips.
Yeah.
Carriage drive to you, Beth Rigby, Sky News. It's really nice to see you and have you back on the pod.
Oh, it's nice to be back.
But the circumstances are not what perhaps
Maybe I'll come on one time when just something happy happens.
Something happy happens, because this is all pretty grim. Look, an awful lot has been said about you and written about you in the past few days. You've been at the centre of not even a UK storm, but a global storm. How are you doing?
I mean, you're right when you like say it's like a storm, and it feels a bit like that. My head feels a little bit like it's got a lot of cotton wool in it, and I have to say it's a weird thing. As I'm really, really grateful to be back at work. Like, you know, God, love it. I love my family very much, and my friends are a brilliant and amazing support network, no doubt about it. But in times like this, like your colleagues from across party, I have to say, they get it, and you don't have to like explain why it's a big thing. They get it, and it's just nice to be around people who understand.
It must be very weird for your friends and family to go, the richest man in the world, this tech billionaire that owns this global platform, and he's like Bezos with Donald Trump, is kind of taking aim at you on this social media platform, and it's exploded, and now you're being written up and talked about, not just in the UK, but all
I have to say,
it must be totally...
It's bizarre for them. I have to say, though, most of my friends and my family had to be told it was happening by me.
It's a good reality check, isn't it?
Yeah, because they're not, no offence to Elon. They're not on Twitter. They're not in that bubble. They're not in that world. So, but it is weird for them. Once they knew it was happening, it is very, very weird for them.
How Ruth, actually, because Ruth and Harriet, because of your scheduling, and we weren't able to gather the ED gang together, which is a shame.
No.
I know I'm in a lot of trouble with everyone about that.
I saw Harriet yesterday, though. She gave me a cuddle in Parliament. I bumped into her.
They did send me things to ask you. You'll be delighted to know. Wow. They're like, well, you've got to ask her this, Beth. Ruth sort of asked me to ask you that, when did you realise that Musk had singled you out? Did it make you feel hunted? That was what Ruth was asking.
So I didn't realise, because I don't go on X anymore.
Do you not go on at all?
No, not really. I don't have it on my phone, so I didn't realise until Jess, who is one of the special advisor team at their Home Office, she messaged me and just said, "Oh, you know, just to let you know, this has happened." At first, I just thought it was ridiculous. Then, sort of clicking through on your phone and realising loads of people are suddenly contacting you, I realised in that moment just exactly what was about to happen, and that the sort of mass interest, the mass abuse that I would suffer, the sudden, like, and it does feel like being hunted.
Did you physically feel sick? Like, just anxiety? Because you were like...
Yeah, I physically, I mean, it's hard to tell because I was feeling unwell anyway, but after the second one, I did just start to feel sick. It started to make me feel sick like the thing that hurts me the most is the idea that it will make, because I am a beacon for this sort of abuse because of the thing I really, really care about. So you become this beacon, but what I am is a beacon for women and girls, and many of them have come to me over the years. I've supported hundreds of grooming gang victims, and you don't want that beacon to lose shine for them so that they can find you and get help from you. Every single day, a young girl or a woman in the country gets in touch with me and asks me for help. Not just my constituents, everywhere in the country, sometimes the world. That happens. Like, women will contact me from Germany and say that this is what's happening to me. And I do my very, very best to reply to every single one and offer support. And the idea that beacon might be taken away from them was the frightening thing.
Taken away because
they misinformation about you.
So they think Jess isn't who she says she is.
Jess isn't going to help me. Maybe I'll give them Kemi Badenoch's number. I imagine she's responding to things just like I do. I imagine that when she gets a call on a weekend to drive halfway across the country to go and pick a girl up from a police station because she won't leave without you, I imagine Kemi's right in the car.
I look at it and I go, well, I know Jess Phillips, and I know that Jess Phillips' entire life work has been, before she became an MP, dealing with domestic violence, and since she has been an MP, campaigning for ending violence against women and girls. So I look at it and I'm like, well, a lot of this is just disinformation. A lot of it is misogyny. And I understand that. But what you're saying is that you look at it and there's a kind of, it's painful.
The greatest risk to me is the risk to the work that I need to be able to do.
So it's like they can take you out.
I'll be completely honest with you, Beth. There is those moments where you go, is this the life I asked for? I was direct service provider before I was an MP, and you think, maybe I'll just go back to doing that. Maybe I'll just go back to running a local women's refuge.
You want
to
remove yourself.
And then you go, no, you're there for a reason. Keir Starmer gave me the job. It was not uncontentious that giving me my job back after I had resigned, and he did it because he believes that I'm the best person to get this job done. Now, what will hurt me in the future is if I have gone through this, and look, and I don't want to overstate it. It's not been pleasant for me, and I don't want to understate it either. But if you compare it to the things I've seen, that those women have been through, that those young girls, I've met women who were branded by abusers, are literally marks on them to say that they were owned. I've met women raped by 20 men in 5 hours. Like, nothing compares. And so then I go back to that. I go, no, hang on. But what will hurt me is if I go through all of this and I don't manage to change things. That's what will hurt me. If I don't manage to make the change, it won't have been worth it. I'm not there yet.
It was interesting though too, Jess, because when it was happening as well, there's a bit of a vacuum.
Yeah, there is.
You're at home. Yeah. Presumably you're receiving an absolute barrage of abuse, I would imagine.
Yeah, so, luckily and lots of people are like, oh, there's terrible pylons happening. I actually didn't see any of it.
Yeah.
But I do have to read my emails because my constituents need me, and those girls that I'm talking about might be getting in touch with me. So it lasted, and it was a barrage in my personal emails of whether it's threats, really vitriolic, horrible hate, nasty communications. I genuinely didn't know what the best thing to do was. Right, I didn't know whether come out swinging is just going to make this worse for me. And I think that there was quite a lot. And, I wasn't not talking to Keir Starmer. I was talking to him. Did
he get in touch with you on the Friday?
Of course he got in touch with me. Of course
immediately.
He did. Yeah, he was away, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
So the man cannot catch a break, literally, have a break.
He got in touch and...
So as soon as he was back, he got in touch with me.
Did he talk to you about how you and he might handle it? Or was it just more checking in that you're okay?
He was much more human about it. He was like, are you all right? What do you need from me? So in a way, I suppose, it's... when me and Keir Starmer talk to each other, we're not talking to each other like government ministers. And one of the things that he said in his response was, I'm glad to call her a colleague and I'm glad to call her a friend. He was talking to me like he's my friend.
Yeah, when he gave that response, did you feel like he was talking to you?
Yeah, well, and also... he really means it. This is a man I've worked with on this subject for years. Before we were both elected, we were in the, the trenches together. So he genuinely, when he's like, don't come for her, how dare you, sort of thing, like that, he really means that. So his response to me was that. We basically he's like, are you all right? Sort of thing. And obviously then, whether it's people who work at Number 10 or people who work at the Home Office are talking to you more about the practicalities. And there was genuine concern, quite rightly, about knowing what the right thing to do. But at the heart of that decision making, I have absolutely no doubt about this. It wasn't, we don't want to offend this person. We don't want to, what about...
We don't want to offend Trump. I mean, this is the kind of
at the
elephant
heart
in
of
the room,
I
isn't
absolutely, and maybe I'm naive and maybe I'm wrong, but to me, as the person who was being communicated with by everybody, whether it's the Home Secretary or the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary, at the heart of it was, we're going to do the most pressing thing here. Is our response going to make Jess less safe? Like, we have to make sure she's okay. So yes, it can feel like a vacuum, and people were like, what it was, there was genuine, like, if I and me naturally, normally when people troll me online, I'm immediately like, screw you back. Like, I come out swinging. And I didn't know. I just didn't know what the best thing to do was.
This felt different.
Yeah, I mean, it is different, isn't it? I'm a government minister for a start off, and that makes it different.
And it's Elon Musk.
It's the richest man in the world.
With a 200 million following.
Yeah. So those two things.
And people that don't know you or live here or have any clue really about.
Yeah. Like, and when I say because I'm a government minister, I'm not as, when I speak, it's determined that I'm speaking for the government, because if truth be told, I'm allowed to swear on this and you're not, aren't you? I remember this. From when we did it. I mean, time would have been like, I'm actually not going to swear because I am a government minister. I'd have been like, like, you would.
She drops an F-bomb, but just did it.
You would just be like, do one.
Yeah.
But like, when I speak now, I speak for the government. And so I do have to be more thoughtful.
The point is, it's dangerous. You can have robust political debate. People can, and we can get onto this, can think that as the government, you should be doing more on grooming gangs. You will have a robust response to that, as does Keir Starmer. But the point was, this was dangerous, right? You were actually under threat. Yeah. Could you leave your house? What was going on?
I mean, I could. Should we let Jess pull the tea?
Yeah. Jess is bringing us some tea.
All right, then I will answer your question.
Are you going to do like a dab?
Electoral dysfunction is what we're doing.
I see.
Is we're pouring cups
what
of
you're
tea.
doing.
I've actually poured it all over the floor though.
Right, you put it in that one.
Okay. I said, you're clever. That's good. That's your Cambridge
It's like because I went to Cambridge, I've worked out how to do
that. Was your
There's Jess. Jess has got it on her. Jess has got it on her. We're now just clearing up the floor.
Oh, no.
What we were saying before the tea was coming, like, you were actually the point of all of it, and Starmer contacting the Home Secretary, and actually you were in danger. It wasn't just keyboard warrior, like, let's have a pop.
Well, the
it
truth
put
is,
you under
that
threat.
And
someone's been charged.
It puts you under the possibility of magnified threat, and you have to risk assess that.
What does that mean?
It's not to say that there was suddenly an imminent terrorist threat against me, like that would be wrong, but you have to look in the round, and so you have to monitor the communications, overt and covert, and look in the round at your risk, and also a sense of my feeling about my risk as well has to be taken. Like, I mean, I've spent my career doing risk assessments on women who are under threat, so it's like I know how to do it.
Jess, is there not a moment as well when this is going on and you've got your boys and I know you do what you do, and I know that you have a lot more threat and risk than many MPs, but is there not a point where you just think, as you were saying, like, I just want to pack this in, like, I don't need this shit?
Of course, there is always that point, and you work through it. I've worked through it every single time. I worked through it when Joe was murdered. I worked through it. Funnily enough, it's them your mind goes to immediately. It's Joe's kids immediately. I was like, oh God, this is going to be horrible for them. Like, because these are like my family. Friends, they're like my family. Little Layla, she's sending me lovely messages. You work your way through that, but do you know who pulled me out of it? The victims of grooming. The grooming victims that I have worked with over the years all got in touch with me within the first few hours, whether it was grooming victims who'd got in touch with me, people whose families had been murdered, some of the whistleblowers, for example, in some of these towns who'd lost their jobs, who I've worked with over the years. I mean, I've literally written a book about the Rochdale whistleblower who lost her job because of the grooming gangs. The idea that I want to cover things up. I literally wrote a book about the Rochdale grooming scandal and how the whistleblowers were sacked. It's just such a joke, isn't it? And so those women and those girls who I've worked with for over years, but I did go through that. Of course I did. I was like, is this worth it? And I'm saying it to my husband. And maybe one day I'll decide it isn't. Maybe that day will come. But it's not today. Too much work today.
When you say, is it a joke? It's also... this disinformation spreads, and it's not a joke. It's scare. Does it scare you? No. Like you're like.
Funnily enough, in the cold light of day, when you've stopped thinking about your own situation, the disinformation in our politics and the threat to our democracy frightens me the bejesus out of me, of course. And so, what you have to do then, as a responsible government, and like you have to take that threat very seriously, and you have to think about how you can deal with that.
Keir Starmer, when you sort of talked about this response he gave, which was, to be honest, it's the most authentic. I think that word is overused, but Jess, you're authentic.
Because I swear, someone once said to me, "Why is it that people in the public like you?" I say, just swearing.
And you call people Babs, which I love.
That's just being a brummie.
I know, but I love Babs. But Starmer, he kind of gave this response in which he appeared to be almost, he was angry. He was angry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I sort of stopped and I sort of stood to attention. Like normally in a speech, I'm like having a little thought about this, writing something down. I drift off. I start looking here or there. And I was completely fixed on him. Did you feel, as the person that was at the centre of this storm, with him actually, did you feel like he had to give that response? Like, I know it completely overshadowed, but calling out the fact that truth matters.
The response that you saw, it is the sincere response. It'd be very, very difficult to look at what had happened and not have that response, which is exactly what some of our political opponents have done. They've looked at what happened and instead decided to make hay with it. And so he would have faced terrible criticism. I mean, to be fair to the poor man, he was as much under the cosh of the comments as I was, to be fair. But
but there's a sort of misogyny in it when it was directed at you. Wicked witch, evil.
Yeah.
He put up a picture of you, which I think had been sort of AI.
Oh, it was. It's like a picture of me opening a fridge. It's not me. It's not in a building I've ever been in.
It's like they've distorted your features and made you look. It's a bit monstery, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's not me. Yeah. It's not me. It's an AI generated thing, which, do you know what, I think really speaks to the issue, doesn't it? It's not real.
There was also a thing going online about saying I mean, this was again Musk saying that you weren't going to call a national inquiry because you were covering up for your boss, Keir Starmer, because he'd covered up for grooming gangs.
I mean, the funny thing is because I worked with Keir Starmer on this, before we were both elected, we were both in the trenches working on this particular issue. What I would find if I looked into the historic cases is there is a beacon in the CPS where this starts to change. And it is under the era of Keir Starmer. So actually, if I were to hold a national inquiry, there's a couple of people who would come out of it absolutely singing golden halos. One of them would be Keir Starmer and one of them would be me. So I'm not trying to hide. If anything, saying no is worse for Keir Starmer.
How frustrating is it for you, like when we talk about this and you actually detail
the facts
of what happened? Yeah. How frustrating is it for you that you are casting away alongside Keir Starmer that does not reflect your lived reality?
Well, it's annoying and it's time consuming.
Does it not eat you up a bit?
No, because actually, to go back to what it felt like on those few days. So on Friday, it was just a deluge of hate. And by Saturday, and it's continued. And, I'd like to thank everybody in the country, but I do need my constituents to be able to get into my inbox. It became completely the opposite. It became, how dare he say this about you, when we all know young women getting in touch with me saying, I just want you to know you inspire me and my girlfriends. Like it became a deluge of, we know this isn't true. And I think that the vast majority of people in the country can see exactly what is happening. And they can see the people who are playing politics.
The Tories have sort of turned it into, and you've seen this sort of Farage did it, and then Badenoch did it, Jenrick's doing it, sort of saying that it's time for an inquiry. GB News did a piece of work where they looked at cases and court documents from around the country and said that they think there could be at least 50 areas where there are grooming gangs. And
there are grooming gangs in every single part of our country. I can't stress this enough. There is nowhere where there is not organised child sexual abuse in our country.
And then they will say, and you know it, but I need to ask you, because this is where the discussion is at, that there should be a national inquiry in Kemi Badenoch's join up the dots, as she puts it, that there's mass rape going on, and it's, the implication also, and I want to get on to race, that it's being covered up by Labour councils. People that say to you, Jess Phillips, you are now in power, you're in government. If you want to have a national inquiry on grooming gangs, you can actually enact that. This is what Robert Jenrick was saying. He was saying it's hypocritical that you're not doing it, etc. Yeah, but what do you say? Like, what would be the argument against having a national inquiry now?
The argument against it, and the reason I made the decision at the point I made it on the basis of evidence. I made that decision not on the basis
This is the Oldham decision. Do you want to just explain it?
So this whole furore started because Oldham Council had written and asked for the Home Office to run an inquiry into Oldham. And I had written back and said, I think the better thing to do would be for Oldham to do an independent inquiry locally. Funny, it's the same thing the Conservative government said.
Yeah.
And the reason I said that is because it was based on my experience, the victim's experience of the inquiry in Telford.
Yeah.
And I was part of it. I supported the victims throughout the Telford inquiry. I supported them before, and I've called with them.
The Telford inquiry was in 2014, was it?
The inquiry didn't start in 2014.
But the prosecutions
The prosecutions, yeah. And I worked with the Telford victims before, and what I did with them, because it's what they asked me to do, is I called for a national inquiry. And then I watched the process of what happened in the independent inquiry in Telford. I supported the victims throughout. I was part of, funnily enough, the day I was actually meant to go and give evidence to the Telford inquiry was the day that the Queen died. So I didn't actually ever have to go and give formal evidence, but I was part of the process. And I had no position. I wasn't doing it as a government minister. I was doing it because I'd supported the victims and I wanted to speak up for them. What I saw out of that was a brilliantly run inquiry that actually led to actual change. And that's what I want to happen in Oldham. It's what I want to happen in Birmingham. It's what I want to happen in every single part of the country where child abuse is happening. And that is why I will convene council leaders to say exactly that and to tell them how they have to do that.
What, you're going to make them mandatory?
No,
because you can't do that.
Well, I can't. I mean, I literally cannot mandate elected officials to do anything.
But that's what you would want to happen.
So, and Oldham are doing it.
Yes.
And what Oldham are doing, and they're working with the people who worked on Telford to make it so that actual change happens. So when Robert Jenrick and people say, now is the moment, they had 14 years.
Why did Oldham request it to be a government-led inquiry then?
To be honest,
I'm genuinely asking, I don't get it.
It's just the process that they go through, and then the Home Office says, no, have a local inquiry, which the Tory government did, I think, 5 times in the past, say, no, it'd be better if you had a locally led inquiry. Right. Now, I didn't used to agree with that, but then my experience taught me different.
The thing I want to come back to, though, on the argument for a national public inquiry, the other thing that people have brought up, so I want to bring it up to you.
They weren't calling for this a week ago.
Okay, in a perverse way, can you see a world in which, and this is a kind of Harriet thought, I think, that actually Elon Musk has somehow brought to attention the violence against women and girls and grooming and all the stuff you've been fighting.
Yes, it's brought it to the attention of people who weren't paying attention before. It didn't bring it to my attention. It didn't bring it to Yvette Cooper's attention. It didn't bring it to Keir Starmer's attention. And every single thing that we announced were things that we were working on already. So all Elon Musk has done has brought it to Kemi Badenoch's attention. Well, she should have been paying attention before.
You're fuming with
I am
Kemi
absolutely bloody furious.
Actually, you were a bit terrifying then.
I am absolutely furious. All I'm going to say is I'm going to start ringing them when I have to go and sit in courtrooms with rape victims. I'm going to start to see if they want to come along. Kemi is an open invitation. Next time I go and pick up a grooming victim, every Friday afternoon in my office, I allocate 2 hours for the girls I've supported over the years because they need to be supported for years and years and years afterwards. And so 2 hours of every Friday afternoon of my working week, is allocated to ensure that any of those girls can come in and see me because they need support for a long time. Kemi Badenoch is more than welcome to come along and talk to some of them.
You're really angry because you think that
I think that they don't care. I think that the idea that Elon Musk made them care when Isabel, a woman who I've literally watched fall apart in front of me and then have to get up and fight. Is not her real name, obviously. It is the name she went by when she talked about it publicly. I cared already. And so did Yvette Cooper. And so did Keir Starmer. And that's why we'll crack on with the job while they wave flags.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
This is from Harriet.
Oh.
The J inquiry wasn't specifically about grooming gangs, right?
It did a 2-year part of the process.
This is what Jay wrote in the report, but there is a race issue here, right? Part of the reason that this has got traction online is the idea that this has been covered up because people didn't want to upset community
It's amazing that they don't care as much about children who were raped by,
Well, I mean, and also there's a whole other area of paedophilia online and kind of, of course there is. And I've looked at the ethnic breakdown, and it's, vast majority actually white perpetrators
of child sexual
abuse. Professor J wrote in a report, by far the majority of perpetrators were described as Asian by victims, yet throughout the entire period, counsellors did not engage directly with the Pakistani heritage community to discuss how best they could jointly address the issue. Some counsellors seemed to think it was a one-off problem they hoped would go away. And this is what Harriet says. She says the J Review is explicit about some reluctance to pursue these criminals because of their Pakistani heritage, and then she asks you, what actions are the government planning that will specifically deal with that problem? So that's from Harriet.
The answer is that, and in fact it is part of what did happen in Telford, is that there is nothing I will not consider going forward, regardless of who it offends. I have to make prevention programmes across the piece on all violence against women and girls issues, whether it's rape, whether when you're a flasher it turns into something worse if you're not stopped, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's child sexual exploitation. And I have to look at what actual prevention programmes, whether that's community relations that we used to do. Funnily enough, like, for example, we used to have public health interventions into things like FGM that were massively defunded by female genital mutilation, massively, got taken away by austerity. There is absolutely nothing that won't be considered. And it won't be whether, like, if there is a prevention system that will work, that is about talking to specific communities, whether that's young men are going to need, there's a growing issue of young people and peer-on-peer abuse, like the fastest growing group of sexual violence victims and perpetrators, like under the age of 18.
I know, shocking.
It's
absolutely shocking.
So I'm going to come up with a prevention scheme.
We should do another pod on that at some point.
I'm going to do a prevention scheme that will specifically target that. It doesn't matter what the thing that is found by the data is. And I don't care how offensive people, although I have to say, no one's ever said that it would be offensive to engage with different communities on different things. To me, anyway, I will do whatever it is, but it has to be based on evidence, not on noise.
But on the question of being held to account, there is this issue that no one lost their jobs. Social services, counsellors, policemen,
Agreed.
Like,
terrible.
Rapists and perpetrators have been locked up. They have been prosecuted
not all of them,
in their thousands.
Not enough.
Yes,
yeah.
But the fact is that these girls have been, and boys, have been disgracefully let down. Like, I find it shocking. I mean, it's shocking. Would that be a reason to have an actual national public inquiry, or do you think it's more about changing legislation?
I don't need to wait for a national inquiry to tell me that there are people who should have lost their jobs, people who should probably go to prison, who didn't because they actively covered it up rather than just were crap at their jobs. I don't need a national inquiry to tell me that. And actually, if I look at the blood scandal, national inquiry, the post office, national inquiry, if I look at the Hillsborough national inquiry, anyone gone to prison? Anyone gone to prison from any of those inquiries? In fact, we've been asking for a Hillsborough law to make this happen of the previous government for a decade. They're not going to do it. We will make a Hillsborough law. This is absolutely, I want to see those people held accountable. And where that is possible, we are, like I say, nothing is off the table. Nothing is off the table. And if the victims come forward to me in this victims panel that I will make, and they say, actually, we think there needs to be a national inquiry into this, or a linking up of that, I'm going to, I'll listen to them. But I'm not going to. I refuse to allow years and years of experience in safeguarding, basing what I know on evidence. I refuse to make government decisions on the basis of a row.
Do you feel
These girls deserve better.
Do you feel like you've been bullied?
It's quite hard to bully me because I am nails. So
Actually, are hard as nails.
So I feel like there's been an attempt to bully me, and you know what? It won't work, and I need to be strong for those girls. And I just want to say to all the girls and women I've worked with over the year, it's the amazing about turn where over the weekend, I think this was probably quite nice and cathartic for their recovery, is that they got to support me. They got to ring me and be like, oh, Bab, are you all right? Do you need a cup of tea? Do you need us to take an hour so that we can look after you? People have tried to bully me before. It doesn't work.
Look, it's the start of 2025. Trump is coming into the White House. In 2016, when he became president, he was like an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he is not. He is...
Well, he's coming. Yeah,
he's coming.
Yeah.
He's got Musk, who's been emboldened by him. You've got Zuckerberg that is scrapping third-party fact-checking services on his platform, replacing it with a community note system similar to the one on X. Are we in like this post-truth world? I mean, how worried are you about it?
Look, you have to deal with the changes in the world as they come along. And again, I will not be batted around by the story of the week. I'm, of course, worried about a post-truth world, but let's wait and see what happens when Donald Trump comes into office. I very, very much... I am able currently to separate what has happened to me with the US government.
Do you think Trump and Musk are going to fall out?
Well, he fell out with Nigel Farage pretty fast.
So
it's, I keep my friends for a lot longer.
Okay, Jess Phillips, thanks so much for coming back on ED.
Darling.